Oh, this protagonist is delicious. Oh. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. 1 second.
Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel. Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel.
Welcome back to the Final Destination series. And the third film really captures the formula of this franchise, which is big crazy disaster, it gets prevented, death kills people, rinse and repeat thoroughly. By now there's no thought and barely even a plot to hold all the ludicrous death scenes together. The film begins and tries to fool you into thinking it cares about creating a foreboding atmosphere, with a CGI-laden montage foreshadowing the upcoming death scenes, like the other movies did. Again, pretending this is a suspense-filled film. We meet our main character, Wendy, played by the way too good for this shit Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's documenting a carnival for her school. Jesus Christ! The audience has barely sat down, and the film is straight in there with its subtle as all fuck foreshadowing. And I joked in the last review, but death really did just write, "You will die" in blazing red letters in the sky. While the group is sitting down, of course one of the guys grabs the camera and takes an upskirt shot. Really glad he'll be in the whole film. Also, why does the camera sound like a fucking guillotine? Even more pointless is the relationship bollocks, as one girl confesses she's breaking up with her boyfriend, which will be completely irrelevant in about 20 minutes. Wendy continues to take more pictures to replace the premonitions of death later, and while walking around we're introduced to her sister, who doesn't like Wendy, and also the big dude bro jock character, who knocks the bell off a test your strength machine that's shown to be very ominous. Throughout this opening section, Wendy is constantly stopping and looking scared at something that's not scary at all, as the scene slows down with ominous music playing. Now, unless I'm missing something, the filmmakers think they can just do that and forget the whole foreshadowing thing. For example, Wendy watches two girls play a carnival game. What the fuck was the foreshadowing there? The filmmakers have completely missed the point. Moving on, we then see the movie's Abattoir, a roller coaster with a devil mascot, voiced by Tony Todd.
It's the beginning of the end.
Thanks, Tony. Same time next week, yeah? While queuing for the ride, we're introduced to the resident goth clique, McKinley and either his girlfriend or friend, since it's never clarified. Oh, there's also two brand new quote-unquote hot girls. The filmmakers must have felt really deprived in the first film. And also, the most annoying character in this movie, Frankie, who does this kind of thing.
Ew.
Yeah, we got that praying for the death of characters thing going on. First time in the series, so that's something, I guess. The group's about to board the ride, but Wendy has issues with being sat up front, so they split up, with her friend's boyfriend sitting further in the back. But it won't matter, they're all wallpaper paste soon anyway. And Death's wheel starts its turn. First with Frankie sneaking on the ride, and then the jock from earlier has a problem with his harness. Wendy takes one last photo before the ride starts, being told the camera isn't allowed, with Frankie obviously being a dick and hiding his own to use on the ride. And thus, the death coaster of ultimate destruction that won't totally kill all its passengers begins. Death's wheel keeps on turning, with the coaster picking up to full speed. Frankie's camera is inevitably lost and caught on the track, which the car hits, completely breaking the hydraulic system, causing the harnesses to release, and the roller coaster itself to slowly disintegrate. The first few cars fall off the track, throwing the jock out, as part of the vehicle hits and buckles the track. Wait a second, I recognise this. This is all fake, isn't it? It's just one of Stephen Price's roller coasters. You know, the guy from House on Haunted Hill. Remember how that ride buckled the track, but it was all just part of the experience? Don't worry, this'll just be your standard fake out. Trust me. Wow. Price is really stepping up his game. I guess the whole haunted house debacle was good for business. Oh, wait. Wendy's still to finish the ride. Huh. A bit unconventional for a roller coaster, but I like it. No, of course, Wendy is brought back to reality as it was all a vision of imminent destruction. She then panics and screams to be let off, with everyone else in her half leaving the ride too, to have a nonsensical fight and then dragged out, while the rest of the passengers ride the coaster, which should be fine now. Anyone else notice the big glaring problem? Anyone? Well, I'll tell you. The two people who caused the accident got off the fucking roller coaster. How did the goddamn thing break? Yes, you could argue that the hydraulics braking had already occurred, but the car running over the camera, which is what set everything in motion, couldn't have possibly happened, therefore no possibility of an accident. And the worst part is that this plot hole could have easily been avoided by it having been a simple accident rather down to stupidity. Kind of like how the other two films did it. Also, roller coaster restraints don't use hydraulics, but compressed air and mechanical failsafes to prevent the casualties you see here. In the aftermath of the accident, Wendy is miserable as fuck, which is a pretty rare moment to witness in this series. Even the guy she was with tries to cheer her up, when he ought to feel the same. And while walking, the quote-unquote hot girls invite Wendy to hang out with them. But come on, I think she's suffered enough. However, before Wendy drives out of there, her friend Kevin tells her that it's happened before, mentioning the plane accident from the first film and Alex's vision. He also mentions the strange deaths afterwards.
They died in the order they would have if they stayed on the plane.
Unless someone intervened, and it skipped them.
Where is he getting his information exactly? Since none of the survivors are alive now to give him this information, and he doesn't even mention the events of the last film, so he couldn't have got it from that. And it's not really the kind of information that would be published in a newspaper. Basically what I'm saying is, that was a pretty fucking lazy way for the characters to understand death's design, with minimal effort and maximum death scenes. And speaking of which, the first of many deaths starts, with the quote-unquote hot girls going for a tan. At the same time, Wendy admits to her sister that she feels guilty about what happened. But that's characterization, so it's ultimately pointless in a film like this. Death is getting restless by now, so let's move things on, as the girls are in the tanning salon with drinks despite being told not to. There's more stupidity when the owner's door starts to close as the girls mess with the thermostat, and then causes a shelf to reach breaking point, which shouldn't be there as tanning salons aren't allowed to hang anything above the beds. Oh, but wait. Pointless tits. That's what everyone cares about, right? The filmmakers must have really missed the first movie's quote-unquote hot girls. Those two characters were in the film exclusively for the tits factor, weren't they? The filmmakers just couldn't resist. And the fact that their deaths occur in a tanning salon means that this whole thing was written with the goal of getting these girls naked, which creeps me out more than any elaborate death scene. Anyway, Wendy realizes her role in this film when she sees a picture of her boyfriend, even though it's not the same as the original shot. And while looking through her other pictures, she finds one of the girls, which looks like they're on fire. At least that's the conclusion Wendy reaches, when she tries calling them. However, that's when they become trapped in the sunbeds, with a variety of wacky happenings to cause the machines to burst into flames, ending them. Also, tanning beds have off buttons inside, so that's another completely impossible death. Now, similarly to Todd's death, I got right to the point. Mainly because the flailing death throes of characters doesn't add anything meaningful, it's just gratuitous. But also, I really couldn't be bothered to censor out their tits. They're dead. That's the only important thing here. Although important might be overstating it just a touch. We then skip right ahead to their funeral. Looks like the victims of the ride accident didn't deserve one. And jumping to the funeral's end, Kevin meets Wendy by her boyfriend's grave, which shows no sign of a burial, so nobody tell her he's probably not down there. Wendy has figured out her particular hotline to the powers that be, showing Kevin photographs which allegedly predict deaths. First, with a picture of Abraham Lincoln with a crack in the lens, following the exact path of the bullet that killed him. And in reality, that crack does indeed exist on the original photograph. However, Lincoln was shot below the left ear with no exit wound, so that theory is just bollocks. Also, thinking about the whole photographs thing, that means that Wendy was being given the means to prevent people's deaths before preventing the disaster that would make the photos necessary in the first place. And then to use 9/11 for your crappy film is just shameless exploitation. After that enlightening scene, Kevin and Wendy do the most logical thing possible and get some fast food. They analyse the whole dying in order thing and work out Frankie is next, and while looking at the photo of Frankie, they try to interpret what it's showing, but nearly crash the fucking car, so well done there. In the drive-thru, they continue to figure out Frankie's picture, first thinking the rope is part of it, but then getting a bit more abstract.
Hey, SpongeBob lives underwater.
It's so sad that you know that.
It's so sad that the writers think knowing a sea sponge lives underwater is some kind of obscure geeky knowledge that one should feel ashamed for knowing. Because if there's one thing the Final Destination series hates more than anything else, is any form of intelligence, no matter how obvious or rudimentary. They move up to order as the screen glitches along with the car's radio, and that's when they notice a truck backing up against the door, for no particular reason. That's not normal behaviour, especially when the truck crushes the mirror. There's no scene explaining why the driver did that. It just happens to set up the incoming death scene. And Wendy sees another truck lose control and travel towards them down the hill. Kevin manages to break the windscreen as he and Wendy escape just in time as the truck hits the car into the vehicle in front. And there really is way too much wrong with that goddamn death. First, I'm pretty sure the laws of physics dictate that the second car would be pushed forward, regardless of whether it had its brake on or not. But secondly, if your engine can be catapulted out of your car like that, you have way more problems than just being rear-ended. Do the filmmakers realise that engines have, wires, tubes, or pipes to keep it in place? On top of the bolts to keep it in place? Do you see how pointless it was to criticise the previous film's death scenes? They pale in comparison now. Oh, and the guy who died was Frankie. Don't give a shit. But Wendy does actually make a good point no one has yet to make.
You saw how vicious it was?
Right you are, Wendy. They are needlessly brutal, aren't they? It's interesting how they had her say that, almost like they were anticipating the criticism. Back at Wendy's place, they go through the pictures again, and they find that the upskirt shot Kevin took showed Frankie with a fan behind his head, pretty much confirming Wendy's picture premonition theory. So now it's a case of using the other photos to prevent the impending death. So they set about next trying to prevent the jock's death, who's at a gym, and he doesn't believe a word either of them say, because the death of 3 people wouldn't lend even a shred of credence on this. However, Wendy spots really fucking fake swords hanging up that match the picture, as she notices a chain of events start occurring around the place. And she doesn't stop it, or even mention it. Wendy just stands there like a rabbit caught in the headlights, even when the guy is seconds from his supposed death. It's really pathetic for a main character, especially when the previous film's protagonists have been relatively proactive. But it's just more evidence in the shift from writing a movie to writing elaborate death scenes with a story wrapped round them. And while the guy is rather over-exuberant on the weight machine, along with everyone else in the place...
Fucking Denver fan! Death were blue and orange! Real man!
Steroids, they're a hell of a drug. And the chain of events occurs, dislodging the, again, fake as fuck swords as they swing down. Now, I hope you paid attention there, because this has been another example of the filmmakers just giving up. Because I don't care how sharp those swords supposedly are, they're not slicing through steel cable. It's just not going to happen. Ever. Ever. Why should anyone give a shit about this movie? It doesn't take place in the real world. This is cartoon rules. Correction. This is Itchy and Scratchy rules. And there's no horror in that. Anyway, on to the death. I hope that was all you were hoping for. There's more Wendy guilt of her wondering why her, but believe me, it's just pointlessly padding the film out. It's then the resident goth's turn to take death centre stage as they work in a DIY store, and naturally, McKinley is doing something stupid, like shooting pigeons with a nail gun. Oh, and don't worry, I know about the nail gun thing, just wait for that one. Wendy and Kevin soon show up to warn the two, and once again, they don't believe the story either, with McKinley fucking with the lights. You know, I don't think anyone could be this blasé now, but it's easier to write characters with that attitude. Fuck this movie, seriously. I'm sure people are going to be annoyed at me for skipping ahead, but it's needlessly indulging these characters, so I'm focusing on the actual death. A shelf is bumped, knocking a box onto a forklift, causing the thing to embed itself into more shelving. And while that's waiting to kill someone, McKinley has a stupid theory.
The last in line were to make the utilitarian choice. Kill themselves. Wow, that's pretty much going to ruin any plan the death's put in motion.
Firstly, this has been proven time after time not to work. And yes, he doesn't know that, but why have the conversation at all? Because either the rules are the same, and this whole conversation is completely pointless, designed to do nothing but extend the running time of this shit, or the rules have indeed changed, without any rhyme, reason, or explanation, making the entire series irrelevant, because the rules are so fucking arbitrary. Take your fucking pick! But Wendy actually does something for once and pushes McKinley out of the way of falling fences, but in doing so causes... and another death scene made completely nonsensical by plain and simple safety features. Nail guns can't shoot without the trigger being pulled. They also need an adequate seal on the muzzle, and lastly, electric nail guns, like the one shown here, have to remain at certain angles to shoot. Come on! These are simple factual errors that even the blindest suspension of disbelief can't really overlook. The next day, Wendy and Kevin realise that the pattern skipped McKinley. Unless there was another person on the ride, Kevin will be next. But Wendy is determined to figure things out. Oh, and McKinley is a creepy stalker now, so that's good. Examining the photos again, Wendy spots her sister was on the ride, and is really the one who's next. She calls Kevin, who's at a town celebration where everyone will be, and he tells Wendy to look at his and her photographs. And looking at the pictures, they're completely vague, with Wendy thinking the shirt with McKinley on it refers to him, and Kevin's is the one where Wendy flashed the camera in his face. Again, very vague, but he takes it to mean he'll get a firework in the face, because the event he's at is a fireworks show. Why would their pictures be so vague when the others were far more self-explanatory? But more to the point, why isn't Wendy getting any kind of vision thing like Kimberly did? Nothing about this film is consistent with the other two. And while driving, Wendy sees that McKinley is behind her, following her. Oh, and then she nearly hits a black wolf in the road. Wait, what? What the hell was the point of that? Oh wait, I get it. Chris Lemke was in Ginger Snaps, where he runs over a werewolf in his van. Haha, very fucking funny. Why was that here? I was wondering before, but was this script actually written by a teenager with zero attention span, just throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks? I really just want to get this fucking film over with now. So to speed this up, Wendy and Kevin see her sister in the crowd, but while they track her down, the series of events begins, just as the fireworks start, with a horse getting spooked by two idiot kids setting off fireworks next to it, as it bolts. The horse's rope attaches around Wendy's sister's neck and drags her around the field, which realistically should have broken her neck. But whatever. Kevin cuts the rope, saving her, and then the girl who was sitting next to her on the ride gets impaled by a flag. But we had no idea who she was. And Wendy manages to save Kevin from a barbecue exploding, so she should be next, as McKinley shows up on cue. Also, anyone else think it's weird that for McKinley to cause Wendy's death, his death needed to be prevented first? This film really doesn't give a shit, does it? They tell him to stay away from them, which tips him off that he's the one that causes her death, and that's when a fireworks stand topples over, firing at the group, missing everyone including McKinley, which seems to please him, until... How how did that happen exactly? No one prevented Wendy's death, so if McKinley was supposed to kill her, then it all should have played out like it was supposed to, with Wendy dying. They can't even keep the death scenes consistent anymore. And now, frankly, this is where the movie should end, with the surviving characters being killed off between this film and the next one. But oh no, this film doesn't want to waste potential death scenes, as we return to Wendy 5 months later on subway car 180. Fucking seriously.
This is Booth Street. Next stop is Osborne.
And Tony Todd there too. Yeah, they're going all fucking out this time. Her sister gets on board, but also Kevin as well. And yeah, fuck this movie, because the train goes haywire as Wendy's sister and Kevin both get horrifically disgusting deaths. And Wendy is left crippled on the tracks, about to be hit by another train, when she's snapped back to reality. But she's unable to prevent the crash, and they all die, making for an even bigger fuck you than the previous film. Why did she get the premonition then, if there was no way to prevent it? What was the point? So, yeah, no one survives this film. They might as well have all just died on the roller coaster and saved us all the precious time. Because this movie is fucking pointless. If there wasn't that ending subway bit, at least we could pretend this film wasn't for naught. But no, they couldn't leave it alone. So I have nothing else to say when a movie does the whole everyone dies at the end shit. It makes it all completely irrelevant. Nothing is gained, nothing is learned. It's gratuitous death for the sake of it. But that is also what the Final Destination films became, starting with this one. And the series will still continue an increasingly nonsensical downward spiral into absolutely fucking shit movies that don't give a fuck about character story and its own fucking continuity. It's all pointless. The first two had at least some tiny sliver of intelligence to hold it together, but for this film, there is nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing of value here. And if you couldn't tell, I've gotten pretty burned out on this series, especially after this shit. So I'm going to be needing an extended break, if I indeed choose to return to this garbage. Fortunately, due to a very kind viewer, I have some Patreon review requests to look at, so it'll be something different and much better coming up. So until then, see you next time.